if you get the air clean, uh, you're going to see a drop in chronic diseases of all kinds.
My name is Michael Rubino.
I'm on a personal mission to make sure you don't get sick inside your own home.
I knew there was something wrong. I'm just so relieved there's something that you can do about it.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Never Been Sicker. Today's amazing special guest is Dr. Dennis from Atlanta. He is an ENT. He also created a company called Microbalance Health. You've heard me talk about their products quite a bit. Very excited to have Dr. Dennis. Dr. Dennis, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to be here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I wanted to start with this. I recently learned that you had a client, a patient of yours had remediation done by the company I founded, Home Cleanse. And the post-testing done after the remediation, which cleared her symptoms that were finally able to resolve. Can you just walk me through some of that stuff? Because I find it highly interesting.
Well, most of the time when you get them to have low counts and close to zero VOCs and zero mycotoxins, most of their symptoms are clear if they can still excrete the toxins. But a lot of these people have the MTHFR gene, which means they can't methylate B12 and they can't dump the toxins. So we have to give them a protocol to do that. But we've had some of the people were on the protocol, but they didn't get better because their house wasn't good enough. So as soon as the house gets good enough, then you start moving the needle because they stop breathing it in. So then you get a result. But you can't get a result without having the home air fixed. Wherever the environment is where they're getting sick, it has to be fixed.
Totally.
Or you're not going to be able to get anywhere. Why? Because they're breathing 3,000 gallons of air a day and you're only washing out with 8 ounces. So it's like being on the bottom of a dirty swimming pool where the water's brown and you're sitting on the bottom trying to rinse all the brown water out of your nose. It's not going to work.
Right.
So
makes sense.
That's why the key is the environmental piece is actually more important than what I do. If you don't get that right, nothing I do works.
How many patients have you had that they come to you, you suspect they have mold, and they tell you something like, no, my house doesn't have mold. No way my house has mold. I have no mold, and they're in disbelief. And what do you sort of do to help them get over that hump that they do actually have mold?
Well, that was a very common situation. So we totally stopped that from happening by simply, before they come in, we have them get a urine mycotoxin level. So if it's positive, you know they're getting poisoned by fungus. And then they have to find where it's coming from. And so you got to do automobile, washing machine, car, workplace, bedding, clothing, furniture, all that stuff. We have them tap tested to discover where the source is. And it's really helpful for them. We have 2 different companies that do it in your company. So they have to test things thoroughly to find out the source, but they know 110% for sure they're getting poisoned by fungus. Now they got to find it. It may not be in their house, but you look there first because that's where most people spend most of their time.
Sure.
And you can have multiple locations. You can have a bad car and a bad house and a bad washing machine. So you got to look at everything at one time, like globally, and find out all the sources and get rid of all of it. That's the key. The environmental piece is the most important single thing to get well. Without that, nothing works.
Now, you and I got introduced to one another mainly because I believe we had remediated a patient of yours. And, it's, as you know this, it's very hard to find companies that remediate properly. So my whole career...
I had never found one before.
You'd never found one before, right?
That's
My
right.
whole career started after Hurricane Sandy.
Yeah.
And because there were so many houses that got decimated at that time, I saw so many houses improperly remediated, and I started doing my own research into, okay, what actually needs to be done to remediate homes at a level where they don't get sick anymore, right? And
Right.
I'll tell you, the first job I ever did was crazy because The house looked great. You walked in, it didn't smell like mold. You couldn't find mold. It wasn't until laboratory testing was done where we actually identified mold. And one of the biggest source areas is right behind the HVAC. So obviously it was just getting into the HVAC, drawing in, distributing across the house. But I was in disbelief because it looked like freshly painted. It looked totally fine. I mean, this house was remediated after Hurricane Sandy, right? It wasn't until I opened up the wall and saw this carpet of black stuff growing behind the surface of the wall that I quickly realized, wow. So just because it looks like it's been repaired doesn't actually mean scientifically it's been repaired. And this is where lab testing becomes really important, and finding companies that do really thorough inspections and remediations is so important. But I guess to bring this up is I can't imagine how many clients you've had that have hired companies that have come in and did whatever they think remediation is, yet there's still mold in the house. And then you're probably seeing the result of that, right? The people aren't getting better. You're testing their toxin levels. They're still elevated. I'm sure you're doing inspections and just their mucus cavities, and I'm sure they're still infected. So would love any insight you have on that. And I think it's really important for people to understand like how important it is to do it right.
Well, what we do is when they first come in, we do a tap test with a SDA auger plate on their clothing, and then we know what their environment's like. And so that really tells us a lot about, what's going on at home or wherever they live. So if the mold plate test with these patients, the really sick ones, it has to be 0 to 2 or 0 to 4 if they're not severely ill. If they have 20 or 30 when I tap their clothes, that's too many for my patient group. But it might be okay for people who can excrete the toxins, but not for this group.
I think one thing I want to dive into a little bit more with you, just because of the opportunity here, is the surgery aspect. How many surgeries have you done for people who have been exposed to mold, and what are you actually cutting out? What are you actually removing from their sinus cavities, if you will, and what are you seeing there?
Well, how many? It's probably 20 or 30,000 people. I've been doing this for 40 years. So
you can give me a summary.
So basically, everything happens for a reason. We would operate on these people and clean out their sinuses and irrigate them. But the way you irrigate and organize ear, nose, and throat surgery is you have a catheter and you put it inside the sinus and irrigate it with saline or something like that. And that's helpful, but it doesn't do, I'd say, a tenth of what newer technology does. So there's a company that makes all the really good equipment for all kinds of surgeries, that Stryker, everybody's heard of them. And I was doing a case in my operating room, and the rep came in and he said, try this thing. I didn't ask him for it. He tried this thing. So it's a catheter. It's got 6 holes in the end of it. And you do high pressure delivery. And then over the top of it, a suction slides over the top. So it sucks out everything at the same moment that you're putting it in. So nothing escapes. That's key. And so it's pliable. So it fits all 8 sinuses to just one instrument. And it takes about 20 minutes to do this. So once you open and clean out all the sinuses, you irrigate each one separately. And you're sucking all of the debris out at the same time that you're irrigating. So when you get through, it's like a porcelain bowl in there. It's just pristine, clean. So I did this one case that way. And this particular patient had significant hearing loss in the left ear for over 10 years. So he's in the recovery room and he's bouncing up and down, shouting, I can hear. And I would bet you $1 million that was impossible.
If we identify where they're living as the issue, right? And then the next step would be obviously they get remediation.
Right.
But as you and I both know, there are so many companies out there that exist to do remediation, but not many of them can actually do it to the level that your clients need to, or my clients need to. And I guess the big question is, for all the people that come to you that have remediation done, how do you know if it's been remediated properly? Do you do another tap test? Do you check their levels again? How do you help them through that journey?
Well, we just see how they're doing clinically. If they're getting better, we know the environment's okay. But if it's not okay, the medication and all the things that we do not work. So we know because of that and the tap test. And of course, you can do a urine mycotoxin level and see that the levels aren't coming down. So those are the three ways we know. But most important one is how they're doing clinically. If on medication, they're not getting any better, 9 times out of 10, it's because of their air.
Right.
Now, the only other one is 3 major causes. Air is number 1. I say number 1 through number 10 is the air, And so the next one is it can be the pituitary gland, because the pituitary gland gets damaged in almost all of these cases. And then number 2 is the diet. So these people can't excrete mycotoxins. So candida in the gut secretes gliotoxin. And so if they're on a bad diet, high carb, high sugar diet, alcohol, all that stuff, it still won't work even if their air is right, because they're overproducing gliotoxin and the brain doesn't clear. So we say number 1, air, number 2, diet, and number 3, endocrine. Those 3 have to line up, and we just work that list.
Yeah, I had a client recently. All these wearables now, they can track all these amazing biometrics, right? And so a client of ours recently came out and said, "Hey, just so you know, I don't know if people are monitoring this thing, but since I've remediated my house, my heart rate variability has improved dramatically," which I thought was really interesting. And are you measuring heart rate variability as a biometric? Are you seeing the same thing?
Well, we used to, even before all those watches came out, we used to do it on everybody and put it in the chart. I sort of don't do it right now, but the patients do. So I had one last week that he said, "Look, I've been 23, HRV is 23." And he came to the office the next day. Now, post-op for day 1, they have a soft sponge in their nose overnight. So this is with his nose packed with 2 sponges. His HRV is 54.
Wow.
Now, I would bet you that was impossible with a sponge in your nose, So you take the sponge out, and so it just goes, skyrockets just by same thing. You're removing what's wrong, the mycotoxins from his nose, endoscopically in surgical procedure. So you're dropping the load, and his house was already pristine, but he needed surgery because he had it inside his sinuses. And it was growing, and it didn't matter what his house was. He had to get it out.
You obviously are the founder of Microbalance, and as a huge fan myself of your products, I wonder what led you to creating Microbalance Health, and how do you use it in your practice?
Well, it was born out of necessity because a lot of these patients were chemically sensitive, and a lot of the things they put in the environment they would react to or make VOCs, and they still couldn't be in it. So we had to get something natural that would work and would also be safe, because somebody's going to drink it, So it's just a question of when. And so we had to get something that didn't matter if you drank it or not; it wouldn't hurt you.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, specifically, the EC3 laundry additive is one of my favorite things that you've made, because prior to that, everyone pretty much was using borax, right? Just straight up. And that was the only alternative that people had. And of course, just straight borax, some people dealing with chemical sensitivity might have a sensitivity to that. So when your product came out that has no sensitivities, right? As you mentioned, it's extremely rare somebody would be sensitive to your product specifically. And for something that's as effective as your product is, I mean, there's a whole game changer. And I don't know if you realize that, but it certainly was. And I know a lot of people love that stuff, including myself.
Well, it does work. And the neat thing about the laundry, many of the washing machines are contaminated with fungus for one reason or another. So we recommend they get the Speed Queen TC5. It's an old school top loader, and it just doesn't get fungus in it like the rest of them. So you can use our laundry additive in a washing machine, but if you've got a front loader, you look online, the major ones are LGs and there are other models that they save the water behind the drum where you can't see it, and then the rubber grommet. So they get huge fungal colonies in there, and patients would have their house fixed, but they'd still be sick, and it was the washers because they were sleeping in it, in their linens, and they were wearing it. So they never got
Right.
rid of it. And so that washing machine is really important. It has to be pristine for you to get better. So that's why we invented all this stuff, because what was out there just wasn't working.
Yeah, those rubber gaskets on those front loaders are a menace. I mean,
Yeah,
they trap moisture in them, which allows mold to grow. Mold's going into the washing machine on people's clothes. If they're not using something like EC3 laundry additive, right, you have a lot of mold that potentially accumulates and builds up, and there you go. You've got a recipe for disaster. But unfortunately, the front loading, they look nice, but the function of them is you need rubber gaskets to prevent the water from coming out. But the caveat there is you're going to trap moisture no matter what you do, and you're always going to have that problem. And so I have a top loading washing machine for a reason, not because I like the way it looks.
now the other top loaders that do not have the agitator, which is a little bar in the center, are totally worthless in terms of they get full of mold, and they don't clean the clothes either. It's like,
Yeah.
putting your clothes in a bathtub and poking them with a stick and then hanging them on a line. It's just, it doesn't do anything. And so on the other side of the drum, it gets a lot of fungus where you can't see because all the water doesn't drain out. So all those were a good idea to save water, but it has nothing to do with cleaning your clothes.
That's the truth, right? And
Yeah.
of course, we want to save water, but we also want to clean our clothes, right? And so I think if I have to choose between cleaning our clothes and saving water, I'm going to choose cleaning clothes, and the reason being because then you're wasting water anyway, right? Because
Right.
you're not actually cleaning your clothes.
That's right.
And you guys also developed some antifungals as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, we do have some antifungals. One of the major ones is called Drops, and that's got many uses, but it's got 4 citrus seed extracts in it, so you can take it orally in water. You can't take it straight because it'll burn you. But for example, if you drink some of that, it will remove fungus from your GI tract, especially Candida. Um, but it also is good for bacteria. So uh, somebody was in traveling and they were had eaten something that was bothering them, so they took the Citra drops. It's about 5 drops in 3 ounces of water. You just shoot it down, then drink water behind it, and they were okay in just a few minutes because they didn't let it get really bad. But this will take care of just about any GI thing. And also, if you have a sore throat, you can swallow. You can put a little bit in your mouth that's in 3 ounces of water and gargle with it, and then swallow it. And you just keep doing that till you finish it, and then drink water. That will totally obliterate a sore throat.
So you also recently created a new product line, and it's like an enzyme cleaner. Can you talk to that and how beneficial that is and where people can use that product?
Well, the enzyme cleaner is good for cleaning anything. If you put it on the surface and let it stay for a few minutes, then it dissolves the material and it's easy to clean it off, like grout in a shower or any surface, uh, or just to clean it, spray it on the surface and clean it. It's very good about getting things off, and it's antifungal at the same time. So it's been uh, real popular because they also put it on wipes too, so cleans things really easy that way.
So like all the pesky mold that grows in people's grout lines and the silicone lines, this product's perfect to help clean that off.
Yeah, but you have to be patient. You spray it on, you don't brush it right off. You let it sit for a few minutes, and then you clean it. It's dissolved the connection between the grout and the dirt in it, or the fungus, whatever it is, and then it comes off easy.
So we do not need to use bleach to clean our grout. Just a public service announcement here, especially with the creation of this new product.
Yeah, you don't want to use bleach. First of all, bleach doesn't kill mold. It's a very unknown thing. It does remove it, but doesn't kill it.
Yeah, that's something that we recently saw updated on the EPA's website.
Yeah.
Bleach should not be used to try to kill mold because it's not effective and still might cause an allergic reaction in some. Very downplayed words there, but at least they've acknowledged it. And unfortunately, the CDC is still recommending bleach because they have not updated their website since the 90s. So we're hoping for some movement there. Dr. Dennis, I wanted to ask you, going back to this issue of homes and buildings and seeing so many people that have been literally destroyed from being in poor air quality situations and having things like an overgrowth of mold and bacteria. Have you seen patients with new homes where they failed the TAP test? Because this has been another growing concern of mine.
Oh yeah. Sometimes the new ones are worse than the old ones. The reason is they don't protect them when they're building them from rain and so forth, and so you get wet lumber, and then they start putting sheetrock on top of it, and so it just grows behind there, and then their grading and all these things are not that good. It just depends on who's doing it, but they'll have down slopes against the foundation wall, and all the water is going against the foundation wall, starts leaking. Those are common things, or the roof leaks, or they put a nail through the water pipe when they nail something in, and it's got a pinhole in it, so it's weeping water. It's not big, so nobody sees it. So the whole wall is totally black inside, but you can't see it. Those are common things.
Yeah. It's all too common, unfortunately. And just because it's common doesn't mean that it should be what's going on, And I think that's one of the things that I wanted to highlight there because, a lot of people say, oh, well, that's a common practice. It commonly rains. There's commonly mold in homes. And just because it is common doesn't mean that we should allow this to happen and it should be a part of our existence as a society. Because as you could see, we've never been sicker than we are today. Hence the name of the podcast. It's unfortunately true. Chronic illness is on the rise. Pretty much every autoimmune disease and disorder is on the rise. And I can't help but think that air quality isn't playing a big role in that. What are your thoughts on the quality of air and the role that it plays in the, really the health epidemic we're experiencing globally?
Well, air is 5 times more important to your health than all treatment rendered by hospitals, doctors, and medication. 5x. And it's 2x more important than your genetic code. And you can't fix your code, but fixing the air is better than twice fixing your code. And 60% of all preventable deaths are due to the conditions of the air at home and at work. So it's the main thing. It's just, what are the things you take into your body? The most volume is air. The second one is water, and the third one is food.
You'll see a big push these days, Fruit Loops and Kellogg's, and we should ban Kellogg's and all the things, which I think is remarkable, by the way. I mean, having all this processed food that we eat's not great. Having all these preservatives in our food and food color dyes that are known to be carcinogens, not good, right? So I'm very happy with that movement. But it would be great if we had a movement focused on number one, right? Which is the amount of air we breathe and what's in that air and its ability to make us sick or healthy, right? If we have good quality air, we're going to be healthier than if we have bad quality air. We see Cancer Research UK come out and say that 1 out of 10 cases of cancer, which is the second leading cause of cancer underneath smoking, is caused by poor air quality, right? And so we're starting to see all these trends and these signs related to how important air quality is for our health. Yet we're boycotting Fruit Loops. And so I just want people to be aware of where they need to put their attention on to improve their health and their overall well-being. I can't imagine they're eating 20,000 Fruit Loops they're certainly taking 20,000 breaths per day. I don't think that they're eating a swimming pool full of Fruit Loops every day. They're certainly breathing a swimming pool full of air every day. And so, can you help put things into perspective in a way where people really understand, if you're not breathing clean air, you're never going to be able to improve your health, which is why they're calling people like you and I in the first place.
I think the reason for that is the group of patients that I see represent about 20% of the population, because they can't excrete the toxins, and they have 3 different genes that are not related, but one's chronic sinusitis, so they react to the fungus when it hits their nose, and they swell inside microscopically and trap the fungus, and then the fungus begins to grow and make mycotoxins inside the sinuses, and so that's where I come in. But basically, it's important that you get the air clean. If you don't get the air clean, it doesn't matter what treatment you have, it won't work, because there's so much volume that you're breathing. So I think the reason the air issue hasn't caught on is because 80% of the population in a bad air environment frequently have no symptoms. And so they may cough a little bit, but they don't really mark it off to anything. And so I think the air needs to fit all the people, not 80% of the people. Now, one important data point is, if you go to a pathology lab and you test all the cancers in that pathology lab, like liver, spleen, bone, brain, lung, all of it, what percent of those cancers do you think has mycotoxins in it? Guess. 87.
87%.
Only 87.
Only 87.
So if you guess that cancer, a major cause of cancer is fungus, you're going to probably be right, because they're already known to be carcinogenic, the toxins. And so if they're in the cancer itself, it probably has a relationship. So that's a major reason why, if you get the air clean, you're going to see a drop in chronic diseases of all kinds.
We know the piece of the puzzle, right? And you have the food, the water, the air, obviously being the biggest piece. Everything kind of drapes down. But how easy is it for you to work with patients to get them on track to adhering to all 3 of those things and actually improving their health as a result?
It's all over the board. Most people, by the time they come to me, they're ready to make a change because they're so sick. So that group of people is pretty easy, because they're tired of being sick. And so we put up a plan together and get their house fixed, get their diet right, and we have them exercise too. So that's what we do. I think a lot of the times these people have situations where they just can't get it together. They're so sick, and they can't work. They don't have funds to do what they need to do, and so they really just need to get out of it. And there's a group of people who actually do that, who don't have the funds to fix the house, but they'll get a tent and be in the yard. They'll do whatever they got to do to get better. And there's another group that won't. They'll just stay in there. So if you know it's making you sick and eventually going to really damage your health, it's not a hard decision to get out of it when it's really bad.
Well, I'm so glad that you're finding success, not only getting, knowing that air quality is a big issue for people, taking them through all those steps, making sure they get their house fixed. You're helping them fix their body. Sometimes you even need to perform surgeries on them if they have mold growing in their mucus cavities, right? There's a whole host of things you do, and then coaching them through the other pieces of getting healthy through diet and exercise, and how all this comes together. So it's really amazing that you do that and you provide that support system for people, because it's confusing out there. trying to get healthy. And even if you think, there's conflicting information that people tell you. So it's great for you to be such a pillar of support for people and to really help people through that. And there's not a lot of ENTs out there that do exactly what you do, that not only do what you do, but have created amazing products for people to use because there was a lack of them that were in existence. So my hat's off to you. Thank you so much for everything you've done and continue to do. Dr. Dennis, tell people where they could find you so they can get in touch with you. You have a couple of different websites and stuff, so please take the time to share.
Well, the easiest one is sinus5.com. Sinus5.com. That's easy for everyone to remember. The website it takes you to is Microbalance Health. And my office is just, Donald Dennis, Atlanta, Georgia. It'll be easy to find me.
Dr. Dennis, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. Really appreciate it. Thank you all for watching and listening, and hope you learned as much as I did.
Thank you very much. Good to be with you.